Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for coming back, and if you're new here, thank you so much for joining us. Please just hit the subscribe button down below so you can join the family. And I release new videos every week, so just turn on the notification bell so you can get notified every time I put up a new video. So today we're going to be talking 15 basic sewing terms. Yes, 15 basic sewing terms and beginner's guide to understanding sewing terminologies. I was thinking the other day that, if someone that has never ever sewn before, or someone that has just recently taken an interest to sewing, comes to my channel and watches one of my tutorials, will they actually understand every term that I'm using? And the answer was, as much as I tried to make it simple enough, there are some terms that I'm used to because I've been sewing for a while now. For a beginner or for someone that isn't used to sewing, it might be strange to them. So I decided to do this video where I explain the basic and the most common terms that you'll come across in sewing. So I did it in an alphabetical order because yes, my OCD just wouldn't let me. So I'm going to start alphabetically. Not all the alphabets are represented, but yes, it's alphabetically. So I will start with backstitch. Backstitching is done to prevent your seams from loosening. So every sewing machine comes with a reverse button or a pin, but there's something you need to push or press to reverse the stitch. So you reverse the stitch to secure the stitch. It's almost like tying it to prevent it from loosening. So that is what we call backstitching. So backstitch, you simply start sewing, then reverse the stitch to make sure your stitch is secure and won't unravel. Next is the basting stitch. To baste simply means to sew with long and loose stitches. It's simply sewing two or more fabrics together with long stitches. And when you're basting, you do not backstitch because it's a temporary stitch. Do you understand? So you don't need to backstitch to secure the stitch. Basting is also done when you want to gather your fabric together, but we will talk about that when we get to G. Next, we're going to be talking about bias. So the bias of a fabric is simply the 45-degree angle of the fabric. So the bias of a fabric is at an angle, it's at a 45-degree angle to the warp and weft of the fabric. Don't get confused, guys. I know this sounds but don't get confused. We'll get there. I'm going to use this fabric as an example. So this is a fabric here. To find the bias, you simply need to fold it at a 45-degree angle. So you fold it this way. You fold it at a 45-degree angle and you get the bias. And the bias of a fabric gives the maximum stretch. So you can see this fabric stretches most on the bias angle. Yes, so the bias gives it the maximum stretch. So fold it at a 45-degree angle and you get the bias of a fabric. So I'm going to use a smaller piece so you guys can see it better. So for this piece, I'm simply going to fold this way, and you can see this stretches more than the ordinary fabric doesn't stretch at all. But when I fold it this way, this angle here gives me the maximum stretch of this fabric. I'm sure you guys can see. So this is the bias of this small piece of fabric. Next, we are going to talk about darts. Darts are a tailor's best friend. I'm serious, a designer's best friend, basically. So darts are folds sewn into fabric to take in ease and provide shape to a garment. So because fabrics are flat, and the human body isn't flat. The human body is three-dimensional. So that means, it has the height, the width, and the depth. That basically make it possible for you to fit the contours of a body in the flattering way. So when you have a piece of fabric that is flat, once you apply the darts, it will point on one side and make it easy for it to curve the curved part of the body. And basically that are folds sewn into fabric to take in ease and provide shape to a garment. That's it. And trust me, darts are your best friends. You can also use that to create style lines for a design. So they are both functional and fashionable. So next we're going to talk about gather or gathering. Gathering is a sewing technique for shortening the length of a fabric so that the longer piece can be attached to the shorter piece. So I have a fabric here that is a perfect example. I don't know if you've seen the tutorial of the making of this dress. This is the size of the sleeve, but I gathered the upper bit so that it can fit my arm. Since my arms are smaller, than I wanted an exaggerated effect, so I gathered the upper bit using an elastic tape. To gather, you can use a basting stitch. So when you sew a straight stitch close to the edge of what you want to gather, and you simply pull the upper string, the upper thread, leaving the lower thread intact, and pull the fabric, so that way you gather it to the length that you want. Next, we're going to talk about grain. And guys, when I first started sewing, I basically did not know anything about grain lines, because when I learned how to sew, I was taught to sew the freestyle method, the freehand method, and nobody really talked about grain lines. I started to hear about grain lines when, I started watching YouTube videos, and I started getting more interested in the pattern drafting aspect of sewing. And I was a bit confused, honestly, at the beginning, but I'm going to try to explain this in simple terms so you guys can understand, because it took me a while and a lot of reading to fully understand what grain and grain line meant. Fabric grain refers to the direction of the warp and weft threads used in weaving the fabric. Don't go yet. Don't go yet. Just hold on. I know this sounds complicated for people that don't understand grain line. So fabric is woven from thread going in two different directions. One, the warp thread is going vertically from up down, and the weft thread goes from left to right. So the trick here is weft is left to right. So just rhyme weft with left to remember, while warp is going from up down. So you have the vertical grain and the horizontal grain line. Are you guys still with me? The bias grain is at a 45-degree angle from the straight grain, just like we explained when we talked about bias. So it is very important and advisable to cut your fabric on the vertical grain line, which is the straight grain line. Don't lose me yet, guys. Don't lose me. The vertical grain line is the same thing as the straight grain line. I'm using this because they are used interchangeably, so you guys can understand. Vertical grain line, straight grain line, and the warp thread, they basically mean the same thing. So it is very important to cut your fabric on the vertical grain line, which is parallel to the selvage. We'll talk about selvages when we get to S. Right now we are in G. So the vertical grain line is parallel to the selvage. And the reason why it is important to cut your fabric on the vertical / straight grain line is because fabric falls more comfortably on this grain line, and your fabric wouldn't stretch out when you cut it on this grain line. It is more firm. Basically, your fabric will retain its shape when you cut it on the vertical grain line. Next, we are moving to hem. Guys, I hope you guys are understanding. Please leave comments below, ask your questions. I'm here to answer your questions. So if there's anything I'm explaining that is a bit confusing, just leave your comments below, ask your questions, I'll reply. And if you're here to hit the subscribe button, hit the subscribe button and join the family. Next, we're going to talk about hem. The hem is the edge of a piece of cloth, especially the finished edge that has been doubled under and stitched down. So I'm going to use this shot that I made a while back to explain hem. So this piece underneath, for this I did not double it, but in most cases for hems you double it and you sew. But because this is a very thick fabric, doubling it would have made it really bulky, so I instead serged the edge and sewed it once underneath. So basically this is the hem of a fabric. The hem is the finished edge of a fabric, typically the lower part that you double under in most cases and sew. In some cases, if you're working with a thick fabric, you can just use an overlocker to overlock the edges and sew it once. So hemming is also a garment finishing method. So in some cases, you use your needle and thread to hem, which is simply sewing from the inside and preventing it from showing on the outside with your needle and thread. So hemming is also a garment finishing method. Next is which is interfacing. I don't have any interfacing here. I placed an order and I'm expecting it later on, but I'll attach pictures of interfacing to this video. Interfacing is a textile used on the unseen or wrong side of the fabric to make an area of a garment more rigid. So you typically use interfacing if you're like if you want that part of your fabric to be more rigid, like the waistbands, the necklines, the pocket areas. You know, you iron it onto the fabric to give the fabric more weight. Next, we're going to be talking about notches. And honestly, notches were another thing that really confused me when I started hearing about them. And I'm like, maybe like, don't forget to mark your notches, don't forget to mark your notches. And I'm like, I don't understand, you know. So let me explain it in simple terms. A notch is a small cut in the fabric that help guide you while you are sewing. To explain notch, I'm going to use this basic bodice pattern piece that I drafted a while back. So let's assume I'm cutting these two separately to give me two separate pattern pieces, and I'm going to be joining them together later on. To make your life easier, it's advisable to mark a notch on the waist point. You can mark a notch on the bust point, mark a notch on the bust point, mark a notch on the waist point. Basically create balanced lines that you will understand, such that when you are joining the two fabrics together or the two patterns together, they just go seamlessly and you don't have to start trying to figure it out. So something that I learned from someone that I watch on YouTube very much, Kim Dave, is she said she uses two notches on the back patterns and one on the front pattern so that she can easily differentiate the two separate patterns. Because I know it seems like should be when you got to just join together, but trust me, when you're working with a lot of patterns, it can be really confusing sometimes and you don't want to start trying to figure out which is which. So just create notches on your patterns to make it easier, so you can decide, oh, for the front notches I'll do one, for the front I'll use one, and for the back I'll use two tiny snips. So they're basically just tiny snips that you make on the pattern to easily recognize what pieces go together. I hope you guys understand. They are also used to indicate seam allowance, hem allowance, dart arms, the location of design details such as pleats, tucks, gathers, pockets, or indicate key points on the pattern like the center back or the center front. So basically just tiny snips that you use to, you know, make your life easier. They're like roadmaps when designing garments. Next, we're going to talk about press. Pressing simply means ironing your seams in place, your stitches and your seams. When you press as you're sewing, it makes your garment look way better when you join all the pieces together. I know it might seem like you're doing more pressing than sewing, but trust me, it just makes a lot of difference and your garments just look more professionally finished when you're actually done sewing. So pressing is basically just ironing, you know, ironing down those seams, ironing them flat so they look nice and professionally done when you're done sewing your dresses. Next, we're going to talk right sides together. I say this a lot in my videos, and sometimes at the back of my mind I'm like, I hope you guys really understand what I'm talking about. So right sides together basically means putting two right sides of your fabric together. So the right side is the more vibrant side in the fabric. Simply put, the side with the more vibrant, where the designs are more vibrant, this is a perfect example. So this is the right side of the fabric and this is the wrong side of the fabric. You can see that on the wrong side you can barely see the design, but on the right side it is clear as day. So this is the right side of the fabric. Some fabric, however, don't have right or wrong sides. So in some fabrics they look almost the same, and in some other fabrics the two sides look really nice, so you can decide to use one side as the wrong side and one side as the right side. This fabric here is an example. This fabric that I used for this short. When I was making this short, honestly, I liked both sides of the fabric, even though I feel this is clearly the wrong side. But for some people, this could also be the right side. For some people, they might like the blue on the white contrast as opposed to the white on the blue contrast. So some fabric just look the same on the right and the wrong side. So you can decide what side you want to use as the right side and just stick to it. So when we say right sides together, it simply means sewing the right side of the fabric together, or the right sides of the patterns together. And most times you sew right sides together because you want to have a clean, continuous stitch when you eventually open it up. So let me use this as an example again. For this, I sewed the right side of the front and the right side of the back together. So I folded it this way when I was sewing, and I sewed it together. And then when you open it up, you have this clean, neat side seam finish. So basically, that's what we mean when we say right sides together. Simply put the right sides of the fabric together and sew. And then you open up to have a clean, continuous finish. Next thing we're going to talk about is seam allowance. So seam allowance is the area between the fabric edge and the stitching line. So it's basically the distance you leave from when you sew your fabric, your seams, to the edge, the outer edge of the fabric. So seam allowances can range from 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch to 1 inch to 2 inches. Basically, it depends on you and your personal preference. But if you're just starting out as a beginner, I will advise you go for about 1 inch, because that way you have more error room. Basically, when you make errors, you have more room for correction, unlike having like 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch seam allowance. And if you make one mistake, that's just it. Now we're going to talk about selvage. So the selvage or selvage, there are two different spellings. The selvage or selvage is the self-finished edge of the fabric, self-edge. So self-finished edge of the fabric. So in this fabric here, again, that we're going to be using as an example, here, this area up here is the selvage. That's the self-finished edge, while this area here is the raw edge. So this upper bit is the selvage. That's basically the finish. When you go buy fabric, the area where they don't cut from, you know, they cut it on the raw edge. The upper and the lower area is the selvage. And when you are cutting, you cut parallel to the selvage because your warp is parallel to the selvage. I hope you guys understand. Selvage often has the information about the fabric and the producer. Like here you can see Heng Fang Y20. I don't know what that means, 760 mm, but basically, and I think this here are the colors that are used in the fabric. So we're almost done. Next we're going to be talking about top stitching. I realized I've said this in some of my videos, and it dawned on me that some people might actually not understand what I mean. So let me use this. I'm going to use this gown as an example. So top stitching is a single or set of machine stitches that apply to the face of the garment of the fabric. They serve both decorative and functional purposes. So in this case, I don't know if you guys can see this on the lining. I top stitched the edge of the lining, and the reason why I did this was to keep the fabric in place on the inside, basically reinforcing my seam so the lining doesn't show on the outside like this. It just stays on the inside. So that's basically why you top stitch in most cases. So you top stitch to reinforce your seams, so basically to hold your facings in place, to close gaps from turning the right way out. They also look decorative. For instance, for most denims and most jeans, you see that the top stitch on the outside, they can use like another color, like brown thread, to just give it a decorative finish, and it strengthens the seams and holds seams in place so they sit flatter, like I did in this case. I just wanted to hold the seam in place so they sit flatter. So basically that's why I top stitch, and this is what we mean by top stitching. So you top stitch on the outside of the fabric, unlike the regular seams or stitches that you do right side together and it doesn't show on the outside. Top stitching shows on the outside of the fabric. Now, last but not the least, we're going to be talking turning. What I mean by turning, very often when you're sewing, you're going to sew the right sides together and stitch and then turn them out. Like in this case, I turned the bottom part of this fabric. So I saw the right side of the lining to the right side of the fabric, then I turned it, pushed the fabric in because I added an extra 2 inch of sewing allowance to this because I wanted the bottom part to look this way, and then turned it in. So this is basically how you sew something without getting a raw seam on the outside. So I'm going to use this as an example. In this case, I just stitched the hem of the fabric down in place so you can see the seam showing. But if you don't want the seam showing, you will turn it. Like in this case, you can see there is no seam showing on the bottom part. That's it. So we've come to the end of this class. I hope I was clear enough. I hope I made it simple enough for you guys to understand. Please leave your comments below, ask your questions. You know, if there are things I could have explained better, just leave a comment below. If there are things you don't really understand that you would like me to explain more, leave a comment below. I'll respond to every single comment. Yes, I said it. I will respond. And if you are still yet to subscribe, please hit the subscribe button. If you watch the tutorial till the very end, thank you so much for watching. It means a lot. Thanks again to the returning subscribers. Thanks to the new subscribers. Yes, I said new subscribers because I know you guys have already subscribed, okay? Thank you. And that is it for this tutorial, but I'm going to be going straight into another tutorial right now where I'll be showing you how to draft a basic skirt pattern. And trust me, you want to watch that tutorial because I would be simplifying everything such that if you've never even picked a sewing machine, if you've never even picked a sewing needle before, you watch this tutorial and you'll be able to draft your own basic skirt pattern. So yes, see you guys in the next tutorial and have a blessed day.